the divine souls. Continuing with the topic of bhakti. Yesterday I was explaining to you that knowledge should lead to love for God. Gyan should lead to bhakti. Knowledge on its own, knowledge about God, which is not followed by practice that gives you some kind of spiritual experience of God, will only lead to pride. If we have only the theoretical knowledge without any practical experience, then that knowledge leads to pride, which keeps us separate from God. However, that doesn't mean that knowledge is not required. Even on the path of bhakti, knowledge is required. In this whole series, I've been explaining to you why we need God, why we should try to find God, what is the means of finding God, how the only means of ultimately reaching God is through the path of bhakti. I've given many speeches in this series, and all of this is to share knowledge with you. So we need knowledge. Even having understood that we have to follow the path of bhakti, we still need more knowledge. Exactly what is the path of bhakti? How is it to be followed? What are the characteristics of true bhakti? And what are the conditions on the path of bhakti that have to be followed? Number 1 is said by Kapil Bhagwan in the Bhagavatam. Mano gatira vichhinna yatha gangam bhasom budhau. Describing the lakshan of bhakti, the characteristics of devotion, he says that bhakti is this: the mind having an uninterrupted flow of loving thoughts towards Bhagwan, towards Shri Krishna. This is bhakti. And he gives an analogy, like Gangaji flowing towards the ocean. That flow is a constant flow. Gangaji is continuously flowing towards the ocean. In the same way, our mind should be continuously flowing towards Shri Krishna. So what is Kapil Bhagwan saying? He's saying that bhakti is done with the mind. This is condition number 1. We need to understand how to do devotion, how to do bhakti. So the first thing to keep in mind is that devotion must be done with the mind. The body can come along and help, that's fine. But that is not the main form of devotion. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ji had 2 terms which he used to help people understand the difference between external devotion and internal devotion. He called it anasanga bhakti and sasanga bhakti. Anasanga bhakti means devotion which is done physically without the attachment of the mind in God. Keval indriyon ki bhakti, man ki bhakti nahi. This is anasanga bhakti. Anasang meaning no sang of your mind with Bhagwan. The mind is not in God, but physically we're practicing devotion. It may be jap, we may be repeating a mantra or a name of God many times and counting how many times we repeat it. This is also done with our body, with our senses. We may do kirtan for hours and hours. This is also a physical act. It's possible to do that without the association of our mind. Our mind could be somewhere else completely while we're chanting God's name, doing kirtan. One may go on a pilgrimage and visit holy places or holy temples in India. Again, this is a physical act which it is possible to do without the attachment of the mind. Someone may physically visit these places but not spend much time thinking of God while they're in the place. They may be thinking about how much money they're spending to go here, how tired their legs are walking, the other people that they're traveling with, they may be worrying about that. Their mind may not be in God, and if it's not, then it's called anasanga bhakti. We may do lengthy pujas to Bhagwan, offering many different types of dravya to him. Yet we can do hours of such physical pujan and not have our mind in God. This is called anasanga bhakti. This anasanga bhakti is not complete in and of itself because it doesn't have the power to purify your mind. It's the antahkarana that has to be purified. Our antahkarana, or mind, or heart, in English there are many different names we can use for it, that has to be purified by joining it with God, or by attaching our mind with God. So no amount of physical devotion can purify our mind. Just like if someone has a sinful nature, their mind is polluted, so they think a lot of wrong thoughts, they do a lot of wrong things, they get angry a lot. So it means their mind is impure, and that shows in their behavior. If that person wants to clean their mind, would you recommend giving them a bar of soap and say, here, use this soap, it's very powerful, go and scrub for a long time, see if you can purify your mind? Everyone would think, no, that's ridiculous. You can't clean your mind by applying soap on the outside of your body. In fact, even if you were to drink some purifying substance, even that would fail to purify your mind. Then why do we think that physical acts of devotion would have the power to purify our inner mind? It doesn't make sense. One time, there was a Sant Sammelan happening, and some of the public were asking a question that, in our scriptures it says that Gangaji is very powerful. It's a divine, holy river. So anyone who bathes in Gangaji, all of their sins are washed away. In other words, their mind is purified by bathing in Gangaji. So the question was that many of us have bathed in Gangaji many times, yet we still have anger, jealousy, hatred, all these things are in our mind. So it means our mind hasn't been purified even though we've been bathing in Gangaji so many times. So has the importance of Gangaji been exaggerated in the scriptures, or is there something else that we haven't understood? It was a very difficult question to answer because it seems like a contradiction. So, since none of the scholars who were gathered there were able to answer the question, they went, without telling the general public, to another great scholar who was nearby, Kripaluji Maharaj, Jagadguru Shree Kripaluji Maharaj. They went quietly to another town where he was nearby, and they asked him, or they sent someone to go and ask him. So he said the answer is actually very simple. If I were to tell you to take a bottle that has an airtight cap and go and fill that bottle with some dirty water running in the gutter, fill it with that filthy water and put that airtight cap on tight, and then submerge that bottle in Gangaji and leave it there for a week or a month, and then pull it out after all of that time and uncap it. If I told you that that water, now it's been in Gangaji for a whole month, you should be able to drink it, right? Because anything that enters Gangaji becomes Gangaji. It gets immediately purified. So would you drink that water? He said, no, I wouldn't drink that water. Why not? It's been in Gangaji for a whole month. He says, but it didn't mix in Gangaji. It was sealed in its own container. So he said, that's your answer. All your pap, it's sealed inside in your mind. And you're bathing physically in Gangaji. How's that going to purify your mind? Your mind has to bathe in Gangaji. You have to enter Gangaji with the feeling that, oh, this is a divine river. She's an avatar of a divine power. And I'm bathing in that Gangaji. With that faith, you join your mind to Gangaji, then your mind gets purified, not by merely physically bathing. So the mind has to be purified by devotion, and for that to happen, we have to do devotion with our mind. Not to say that physical devotion has no value, it does. But its value is that it's supposed to help us attach our mind to God. When we visit a holy place or a Leela Sthali in India, we're supposed to go to that place with these feelings that, oh, God has walked here, Ram did this Leela here, Radha Krishna did this Leela here, they walked on this very ground. With those feelings, if we visit these places, then our faith multiplies and our mind becomes more attached to God. When we do kirtan, it's supposed to help us focus our mind on doing smaran of Bhagwan. It's supposed to help us keep our mind engrossed in thinking of Radha Krishna for longer and longer periods of time. It's not just that the kirtan itself or the act of singing God's name itself has the power to purify one's mind. It has an effect, but the effect is not nearly equal to the effect that you can get if you do it coupled with meditation on God. So this is the first condition. The mind must do devotion. Always remember that. Antaranga bhakti, the internal devotion, is the true devotion, and bahiranga bhakti, bahiranga sadhana, that is to help with the internal devotion. It should never be viewed as a complete path in and of itself. All of the physical forms of devotion are meant to help us keep our mind attached to God. In this way, the philosophy of our scriptures, as described by Jagadguru Shree Kripaluji Maharaj, is presented in such a way that it reconciles and reaffirms all the styles of devotion that have been taught by our historical saints. Whether it's Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Vallabhacharya, Swami Haridas, Chaitanya Mahaprabhuji, Nimbarkacharya, Hitaharivansh, all these great saints who established ways of doing devotion. And nowadays people look at it and they may become confused that, oh, Vallabhacharya said to worship God like this, and then this other saint said to worship God like this. So the physical form of devotion that they taught may differ. One may have said, okay, do this type of puja to Krishna, offer him this at this time of the day, do his arti in this way at this time of the day. And another saint may have said, okay, do kirtan. Another saint may have said, do jap. So people feel like, oh, why do we have these differences? These are only the physical differences. Internally, it's exactly the same. You have to remember Bhagwan. That's it. Unka smaran karo. Fir kuch bhi add karo, uske saath kuch bhi karo. Kripaluji Maharaj describes that when he was a boy, he was only 16 years old, he went into the jungles for quite some time, alone. And while he was wandering in these remote jungles of central India, One day he came upon a great devotee of Shri Krishna, an elderly devotee with long gray hair and a long matted gray beard, who had a very simple small hut, and he was sitting outside of his hut. As the very young Kripaluji Maharaj approached, he approached from a distance, and this Babaji didn't notice him, but Kripaluji Maharaj saw him. He saw that he was sitting on the ground outside of his hut, looking towards the path. There was a path that came through the jungle towards his hut. So he was watching the path expectantly, and he had a comb in his hand. An old, broken comb, but a piece of a comb. And he was trying to comb his beard and comb his hair. Kripaluji Maharaj noticed this, and he was watching. And then he saw that this Babaji, after trying to comb himself for some time, then all of a sudden he just exclaimed, "Ha Krishna!" and he fell on the side, dropped his comb. He also had in one hand a little piece of a broken mirror that he was trying to look at himself with. He dropped that the other way, and he fell. Kripaluji Maharaj understood that he's in viraha of Shri Krishna. He has so much longing to meet Shri Krishna, and he's watching this path, waiting for Shri Krishna to come to him. But why is he combing his hair and his beard? Maybe I'll ask him if I get the chance. So he watched a little more. That Babaji regained consciousness. And as soon as he regained consciousness, he looked around. He picked up that piece of the comb. He picked up the piece of the mirror. And he again started trying to comb his beard and his hair, which was totally matted and long, but nonetheless, he was trying to fix himself up. And again, after a few minutes, "Ha Krishna!" and he fell unconscious again. So after watching this for a while, Sri Maharaji came to that Babaji and he requested of him that, "Oh Babaji, what are you doing? It's very curious to me. Why are you trying to comb your beard and your hair?" He said, "I'm waiting for my beloved Shri Krishna to come. I'm his gopi, and I'm waiting for him to come to me. I've been waiting for so long, but I know he may come at any time. So I want to be presentable for him, that when he comes to me, my appearance should please him. So I'm trying to look as good as I can." So when Shri Maharaji told us this story, he said, "Is this type of devotion described anywhere in our Vedas, anywhere in our Puranas, that you should do devotion with a mirror and a comb?" No. But it's bhakti. See, where was that Babaji's mind? In Krishna. He was longing for Krishna. He was calling for Krishna. It means his mind was in Krishna. And for him, his physical style of doing bhakti was with the comb and the mirror. We sit and we do kirtan. We call Krishna's name, but our emotion, our bhav, should be the same as that Babaji's. What are we doing? We're calling Shri Krishna to come to us. So the physical form is not a fixed thing that you can only do devotion in this way. You must chant this mantra. You must chant this name of God. You must do puja in this way. That's not a fixed thing. Different saints introduced different physical forms of bhakti for the people of that time who were living, that they met, and introduced that as a way of helping those devotees to attach their mind to God. It doesn't mean it was the only way. It doesn't mean every other way is wrong. In fact, they're all right. They're all correct. As long as the one practicing that keeps their mind in Krishna, can do any kind of physical bhakti. So you see, Kripaluji Maharaj was known for reconciling the philosophies. He was known for reaffirming the teachings of all the great saints and all of our scriptures. He did not create more divisions, saying this way is right and this way is wrong. He showed how internally, essentially, all these ways taught by our true historical saints, they're all one, actually. So when we understand that, then all of the confusions go away and we say, okay, I'll find the form of devotion that works the best for me. As long as internally you keep remembering Shri Krishna, you keep remembering the form of God that you're doing devotion to, then your devotion is correct. However, our saints and scriptures have told a few more conditions. This is the first, that bhakti must be done with the mind. In addition to that, there are a few more conditions that we have to consider. Rupa Goswami, who was one of the main disciples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhuji, he wrote a very important scripture describing about the path of devotion. It's called Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu. So in that, he has one shlok that describes a couple of the conditions of bhakti. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadhyanavritam. The first thing he says is Anya abhilasha shunyam. Abhilasha means desire. Anya abhilasha. Shunyam means total lack of. Total lack of what? Abhilasha. Desires. But he says Anya abhilasha, which means other. So it must mean you're allowed one desire, at least one desire, and all the other, all the Anya abhilasha, those should not be there. Narad ji also says, Gunarahitam, Kamanarahitam, Pratikshana Vardhamanam, Avichinnam, Sukshmataram, Anubhava Rupam. Describing bhakti in his Narad Bhakti Darshan, he says, Kamana Rahitam. True bhakti is Kamana Rahit, without desire. Bhagwan Kapil, in his description of bhakti in the Bhagavatam, says, Lakshanam bhakti yogasya nirgunasya hyudahritam ahaitukya vyavahita sa bhakti purushottame. The characteristics of bhakti are as follows. Nirguna, ahaituki, avyavahit. He tells three conditions of bhakti, or three characteristics of bhakti. The first one, nirguna. Nirguna means, see, gunas are, the mayak gunas are sattva, raj, tam. So he says you shouldn't have any sattvic kamana, rajas kamana, or tamas kamana when you're doing bhakti. Then your bhakti is nirguna. No sattvic desire, no rajas desire, no tamas desire. And this is nirguna bhakti. Ved also says, Upasate purusham hyakamah. Upasate purusham ye hyakamah. Hi akamah. Without kamana. Do upasana without kamana. Someone may question that, but don't we have a long history recorded in our scriptures of devotees who have prayed to God with some kind of worldly desire and they got that desire fulfilled? Yes, we have many such stories. One such story is the story of Dhruv. Dhruv was a very young boy, a devotee of Bhagwan Vishnu. He used to worship Vishnu along with his mother. He learned devotion to Vishnu from his mother. They used to worship together. And when Dhruv was still very young, since his father, Uttanpad, had two queens, so Dhruv also had a half-brother, Uttam. Uttam and Dhruv were good friends. Dhruv was a little bit older to Uttam, but they got along very well. The problem was that Uttam's mother was jealous of the fact that Dhruv was older, thus he was going to become the next king, not her son, Uttam. So she showed her jealousy to Dhruv by treating him in a mean way, because she was actually the favorite of the king. She was probably younger, more beautiful, whatever the reason. The king was more favorable towards her than to Dhruv's mother. So one day Uttam was sitting on the king's lap, and Dhruv came and thought, I'm also going to sit on the king's lap. And Uttam's mother said, how dare you? You have no right to sit on that throne. If you want to sit on the king's lap, you should have been born from my womb. Only Uttam has the right to sit there. So Dhruv was shocked and hurt. He's only 5 years old. And she's treating him so harshly. So he went crying to his mother, and his mother said, you know, there's nothing we can do. We have to accept it. Dhruv said, I can't accept it. She said, well, there's no one here who can help you. Only God can help you. Dhruv said, okay, I'm going to go and find God Vishnu and ask him to fulfill my desire. He decided that his desire was not only to become king and get to sit on his father's lap as he pleases, but to get a higher status than any of his forefathers. See, he was son of Uttanpad. Uttanpad was son of Manu. And Manu is son of Brahma. So those are his forefathers, Manu and Brahma. He said, I want to get a higher status than any of them. Manu is the ruler of all of Bhulok. See, our Brahmand, our planetary system, our little part of this universe, is called a Brahmand. It's made up of some different sections: Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha, Maha, Jana, Tapa, Satya, 7 different lokas. So Bhulok includes this physical earth plus the lower celestial abodes. Manavagandharvalok, Devagandharvalok, these are included in Bhulok, the lower celestial abodes. So Manu rules. Manu is the first saint who's sent on earth by Brahma to begin human population. He is not only the ruler of the earth, but the entire Bhulok. So he's a great ruler. And then Brahma is he actually is the ruler of the topmost abode of Swarg. There are 10 different abodes in Swarg. His is called Satyalok. So he has the topmost position in our Brahmand. So Dhruv was thinking, I want to get an even higher status than that. He's only 5 years old, but he has this lofty ambition. On the way, you see, now he decided, okay, I'm going to the jungle, mother. I'm going to pray to God Vishnu until he comes to me, and then I'm going to ask him for this. So he left all of his royal comforts and he headed for the jungle. His mother actually made him some clothes out of bark to wear and then sent him off. So on the way, Naradji comes. Narad had appeared a couple of times previous to that in Dhruv's life. Now he appeared again. And he said, oh, young Dhruv, where are you going with such determination? Dhruv told him the whole story. So Naradji says, you know, the wise just accept their destiny as it is. And they try to live a stress-free life, do your best, but whatever comes, you accept it, the good and the bad. So Dhruv, just go back and live your life the best you can. He said, Naradji, that's not my character. I cannot accept this. I want to find God Vishnu and I want him to fulfill this ambition of mine. Naradji said, okay, in that case, you go to Madhuban in Vrindavan, you go there and you have to meditate on Vishnu. He gave him a mantra with Vishnu's name in it, and he told him, you have to picture the form of Vishnu, not just repeat the mantra verbally, you have to meditate on his form. So he described the form of Vishnu and he said, you picture that form in your mind and you keep your mind focused on that form and you keep repeating his name. This will purify your mind, and when your heart and mind are 100% joined with Vishnu, he will come to you. Then he'll fulfill your desire. So Dhruv did that. He was very focused and very determined. It's not like he did devotion now that he went to Madhuban. It's not like he did devotion for a few hours a day and then played for a few hours a day. The kind of how we are, you know, we can do some devotion, some seva, then we feel like, oh, I need a break, I want to watch some TV. Dhruv was completely focused. For 5 months, he did almost continuous devotion. He took some breaks here and there to drink some water, eat some food, but even the last month, he didn't even do that. No water, no food. His breathing even ceased the last month. So he had this image of Vishnu in his mind. It had been many months. All of a sudden, this image that he had in his mind vanished. So he opened his eyes and there was Vishnu standing in front of him. In other words, his devotion was complete. Through that mental devotion to Vishnu, he purified his mind. His faith and surrender reached the point of absolute 100%, and thus Vishnu appeared before him. And he said, now I'm going to grant those wishes that you had in your mind, that ambition you had in your mind, the reason that you did devotion to me, I'm going to grant those wishes to you now. And he did, and then he left. What was Dhruv's reaction now that he had gotten the divine vision of God Vishnu and gotten his material desires fulfilled? He says, I feel like I've made a big mistake. He says, this material boon which I've received from Bhagwan Vishnu, this seems like a useless thing to me because it's a material thing. He actually granted him to become, his status or his place was the North Star, higher even than Brahma. And he had to go back and rule the kingdom as well. And when he went back, he was welcomed back by his family. Everyone missed him so much. But he felt that I did that devotion to God and he came to me in that form. And what did I ask him for? Merely material things. He says, these things I've asked for, they're as useless as medicine to a dead person. That's how he felt about what he had asked for. So does God fulfill material desires of his devotees? Yes, he does. But look at how the whole thing happened. Did Dhruv just say, oh, Vishnu Bhagwan, I want this thing, just casually, or like pray to him and ask? No. He knew he had to make Vishnu appear before him. In other words, he had to get 100% surrender to Vishnu, then Vishnu would physically appear and grant his wish. This is the way it works. Look at any example from our Puranas. There are many such examples of Sakam Bhakt who did devotion to God with some kind of worldly desire. Every single example, they had to do devotion with their mind, purify their mind, become 100% surrendered to God, and then God physically appears before them and grants their wish. We have never done such a thing, have we? When we pray to God for some worldly desire, we ask Him, we may even have a long list of things that we're asking Him. But have we ever asked Him in the way Dhruv did? With that determination that you must come to me, then I'll ask you? So this is the true Sakam Bhakti. It's done with full faith, full surrender. Have we ever asked God for anything with full faith and full surrender? No. Because if we had, He would have appeared before us and granted that wish. He does not grant wishes remotely, leaving any doubt in your mind that, oh, did this happen through God's grace or not? He will appear before you. In other words, you become God-realized. Then He grants that wish. When we pray to God, most people, I would say more than 90% of people, probably pray to God with some kind of worldly desires. They have something they want God to help them with. This is not a bad thing. It's not a wrong thing. In fact, Shri Krishna says in the Gita, Chaturvidha bhajante mam jana sukritinor arto jigyasurartharthi jnani cha bharatarshabha. He says that, Arjun, there are 4 different types of people who surrender to me. Artah, Jigyasu, Artharthi, Jnani. 4 different types of people. But notice, they surrender to Him. That means 100%. So the Artharthi, that means someone who has a worldly ambition. They want that ambition fulfilled. The example is Dhruv. That's one famous example. Another type of person who surrenders to Him is described with the word Artah. That means someone who's in distress and they want God to save them from some dire situation. A great example of this is Draupadi. Draupadi was dragged in front of all those elders in the court by Dushasana. He dragged her by the hair. He was threatening to disrobe her, who was such a respected and honorable lady, in front of all of these respected elders there in Hastinapur. What did she do, given this situation? Well, first of all, she hoped that her husbands, Arjun, the Pandavas, would come to her aid, but they didn't. So then she turned her attention towards the elders of the court, Bhishma, Pitamaha, Kripacharya, Dronacharya. Surely these great elders would not allow this to happen in front of them. But none of them was willing to step up and tell Dushasana and Duryodhan, no, this cannot happen. They remained silent. So Draupadi tried to save herself by catching the end of her sari between her teeth and clamping down her teeth. But when Dushasana started pulling, she felt the sari slipping out. And if one more moment went by, that sari was going to slip out and it would be end of the story. So at that moment, when the sari was slipping out of her teeth, she called to Krishna with 100% faith and surrender. Please save me. And Krishna appeared. It's called Ambaravatar. He appeared and took the form of an endless sari, so that no matter how much Dushasana pulled the sari off of her, there was always more material on her. So he kept pulling and pulling, and this mound of sari just kept increasing until eventually Dushasan gave up. She was also 100% surrendered. She wasn't, you see, before she was partly surrendered, but she was still relying on her own bal, or she was hoping that someone else would save her. Thus, Shri Krishna didn't come. When did he come? When she had 100% faith, 100% surrender. So we have never had that kind of faith and surrender in God. Yet, sometimes we believe that God fulfills my desires. Or I asked God to help me, and He did help me. I would say that such instances have to do with our own destiny. You see, all of us have a destiny. There are three kinds of karma: sanchit karma, kriyaman karma, and our present life's destiny, prarabdha karma. What is kriyaman karma? Our present actions that we're performing. We're doing something every moment. We're thinking some thought which is being counted by God. He's observing it, keeping track of it, and according to the quality of that thought, He's categorizing it as a sattvic, rajas, or tamas karma, or as devotion if our mind is in Him. So you can do karma, you can do mansik karma with your mind, you can do vachik karma with your voice, you can do sharirik karma with your body. However, the intention behind it, the attachment of the mind, that is what will qualify the action as good or bad. So it's really the mind which does karma. So we do kriyaman karma, we're doing some kriyaman karma every moment. All of the accumulated actions of our uncountable past lifetimes, that is called sanchit karma. And then out of all of that unlimited amount of sanchit karma, a small part of that has been given to us to undergo bhogane ke liye in this life. That is called prarabdha karma. That prarabdha karma has been described in the Mahabharata in this way: avashyameva bhoktavyam kritang karma shubha shubham. The shubh and ashubh karma, the good and bad actions that we have done in our past lifetimes, avashyameva bhoktavyam, those must be undergone. We must undergo the consequences of that past karma that we've done in our previous lifetimes. Purvameva kritang karma, purva janma kritang karma, tadbhagyamiti kathyate. The purva janma kritang karma, the karma we've done in our previous janma, in our previous lives, that becomes our bhagya or our prarabdha in this life. There's no escaping it. Whatever's been given to us to undergo in this life, we must undergo it. Jnani bhugate jnanate murakh bhugate roya. Tulsidas Ji says everyone has to undergo their past karma. The wise person undergoes it with the understanding that I'm getting the results of what I've done in my past life. So I take the good with the bad. And the murak, the one with ignorance, who doesn't have this knowledge, they cry for everything that happens to them. Oh God, how could you let this happen to me? Oh God, please help me from this situation. Hani labh jivan maran yash apyash vidhi hath. Tulsidas ji goes on to say that certain things in your life are destined because of what you did in your past lifetimes. One is your hani and labh, your loss and gain financially is determined by how generous or miserly you were in your past life. That determines how much wealth you're going to get in this life. Jivan maran, what kind of family were you born into, and what is the time of your death? That is also predestined according to your previous life's karma. Yash and apayash, having a good name, getting a bad name, being famous, being infamous, being popular, remaining unknown, all of these things are also determined by your previous life's actions. So you have to undergo these consequences, and simultaneously you're always performing new actions which are going to be added to your sanchit karma, and part of that will be given to you as your prarabdha in your next life. So you see this law of karma, that whatever actions you have performed, you have to get the consequences of that. This applies to everyone equally. We're all under this law. Just like the traffic laws, they apply to everybody. The social laws, they apply to everybody. This law of karma, that you have to get the results of what you've done, it applies to everybody. So when we are responsible for our own situation in life, even if we say, oh, it's my bad luck that I didn't do anything in this life to cause this situation, but yet I'm in this bad situation, it's my bad luck. Where did that bad luck come from? It came from my bad actions in my previous life. It didn't come out of nowhere. So when this, what I'm presenting to you now, is a contradiction in our own thinking. If we accept this law of karma, that this is fair, this is how the universe is governed, that according to our actions, good and bad things will happen to us, then how do we reconcile this with the idea of asking God for material things or asking God to save us from some kind of bad situation? Will God do that? That's the question. Is that not a contradiction if we say, yes, God answers my prayers? I have prayed to God many times and I got the thing that I asked for, or I was in trouble and I asked God to help me and then my troubles went away. So if we say that on one side, then how can we also say on the other side that the law of karma applies equally to everybody? Someone may say, well, I prayed, so I got the help. Then it brings up a question, is God not a just God? Samoham sarvabhuteshu name dveshyosti na priyah. Gita. Shri Krishna says, I do not favor anyone or oppose anyone. I am samadarshi. I view all the same. And is God not all-knowing? Yah sarvagyah sarvavidyasya jnanamayan tapah. Ved says God is sarvagya. He knows everything. He knows everything we're thinking. He knows what's in our destiny. He knows everything we've done. He knows our desires. He knows what's best for us. So if God is all-knowing and God is all-kind, so in other words, He knows what we need and He's kind by nature, so why should we have to tell Him what we need? Doesn't He already know what we need? And if He's kind, wouldn't He be giving us that already? It's a contradiction, isn't it? That we, limited beings of limited knowledge, have to tell all-knowing God that, God, I need this thing. He knows what we need, and if He's kind, He would be giving us that thing. So maybe God has some law that if you don't ask me for it, I won't give it to you. What kind of law is that? Even sometimes we pray for other people's well-being. That my friend is suffering, my family member is suffering, God, please help him. So then you would ask yourself the question. Let's say two people are suffering. They both have a similar illness. Perhaps that illness is the result of some karma they did in their previous lifetime. Not all illnesses are. Some of them are just the result of our own carelessness or unhealthy living in this life. But some illnesses could be the result of our past life's actions. Either way, we're responsible, aren't we? We're responsible through our poor diet, lack of exercise, whatever it may be in this life that got us into trouble, or we're responsible because of the bad karma we did in our past life. Either way, we caused our illness. So let's say there are two people with a similar illness. One person has someone praying for him, one person doesn't. He doesn't have any friends, no family. At least his family's not religious, so they don't pray to God to ask for help for him. God sees everything. He sees the suffering of both people. He sees the actions of theirs which led to their suffering. And He sees that this person has a family member who's praying to me to help him, and this person has no one praying to him. So is God going to only help the one who has a family member praying for him and not the other one? It doesn't seem to make sense according to how we think of God, yet on the other hand, if you look at practically how we behave, we do look for special favors from God in such instances, even though it seems to be out of the bounds of what the kind of behavior we would expect from God. So these are all contradictions that have to be resolved. We'll resolve these going forward from tomorrow. Boliye Vrindavan Bihari Lal Ki Jai.